You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Good evening and welcome to Ecto Portal. This is Anthony Anderson. I'm your host. I'm here with
Verna Wilson,
my co-host. Tonight's show is actually pretty intriguing. It's a true story about Devil's Pass, also known as Dyatlov's Pass. 1959, some experienced hikers went up into the mountains. This is in Siberia, so we're talking snow, ice. Only experienced hikers could go in here. Mm-hmm. They went in, hiked in for days and days, kept a diary, and next thing you know, no one hears from them again. For 3 months, they send a search party back in, and they find all kinds of interesting things, and we'll cover that tonight. But Devil's Pass is tonight's
and the
topic.
more you hear this story, the weirder it gets.
It is, and now you see why I chose it, because it's such a weird, unexplained topic. There's so many factors that we don't really know.
Right, exactly.
And we're going to go into some information now about the actual whole case. In the annals of the weird, few cases are stranger than the Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959. The mysterious and grisly deaths of 9 Russian students on a cross-country skiing trip to the Ural Mountains of Russia defies easy explanation. The pass was named after the leader of the expedition, Ivor Dyatlov, who led his fellow students in an attempt to climb the foreboding Kholat cycle, known colloquially as the Mountain of the Dead. Despite some very bad weather, the trip started well, and many photographs of the expedition survived, showing the party in high spirits. The students arrived shortly before tragedy struck. However, on the night of February the 2nd, the group cut themselves out of their tents for reasons unknown, fled the safety of their camp wearing nothing but their underwear or odd clothes. They were never seen alive again. 2 weeks later, a search party found their camp. The tents were found. A further 2 months... The tents ripped to pieces and their clothes and belongings scattered around. Nearby, the bodies of 5 of the students were found. A further 2 months elapsed before the remaining students were recovered, buried under 4 deep snow some 75 meters away. All 9 students suffered severe injuries, including crushed ribs, fractured skulls, broken limbs. Some of the students' tongues and eyes were missing, and the rescuers noticed a peculiar reddish-orange hue to their skin. Now,
that's, it makes me wonder if these were, these students were apparently from the region.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they were used to the mountains and the weather conditions. They were used to where they lived, so they possibly expected to be experienced in this, and they were probably prepared for the weather conditions. And
Yeah. I mean, they've all done expeditions like this before. They knew how to pack. They knew what to expect.
Right, experienced hikers,
Yeah.
and especially experienced hikers for a Russian landscape where they have severe winters and severe weather.
Very cold. So they know how to take care of themselves. They
Right.
knew whenever you're stuck, emergency, they know exactly what to do. This is what the interesting part is.
And they were all together. It wasn't like it was one person that can get into danger and then there's nobody around to help.
Exactly. The Russian investigation after this happened attributed to the deaths to an unknown compelling force. That was their final outcome or solution. The last image taken by the party showed a strange light or glow possibly through the upper corner of the tent. This, along with reports of high radiation on the bodies and strange lights observed in the sky, have led many to believe that aliens may have killed the party. Conventional explanations, however, posed they were killed by a combination of bad weather and a nearby avalanche. Were the ill-fated students killed by an alien force? Now, there were damage to the bodies. The injuries to the students suggest they were subject to some kind of predator. The rescue party found the first two bodies next to a long extinguished fire under a cedar tree. Despite the freezing conditions, temperatures had reached as low as below 24 degrees.
Oof.
They were only wearing their underwear. Stranger still, rescuers determined the damage to the tent had come from inside. So whatever had happened, they had seemingly fled their camp in great haste. So they literally had to tear from the inside of the tent out.
Yeah.
Or rip it to get out.
To get out. So
something had to have happened.
and they didn't inspect the camp to see what kind of damage, if there was like some kind of
There
damage
was no
from
footprints around,
nothing,
no struggle.
no damage from an animal like
Nope.
entering its way in.
Nope,
Or
they looked for all of that stuff. Many of the branches of the tree were broken as the two men had attempted to climb it so frantically they had ripped their skin off their palms. So they were so desperate to climb the tree, they ripped the skin off their palms.
Those are people who are freaked out.
Right.
So they're freaked out by something.
Now, what had caused such terror? It seemed unlikely to be animals since only the students' tracks were found. Nearby, the team leader's body was found a few hundred yards closer to the camp of the bodies of two more. It wasn't for a further 2 months, so this is like going on now, 4 or 5 months,
Long time,
after
yeah.
the deep snow had begun to melt, that the remaining 4 were found buried in a den they had dug out to escape the terrible cold.
Oh, how horrible.
Now, unlike their compatriots, the last 4 were fully clothed, all by an odd mishmash of scavenged from their dead colleagues. So in other words, people had died before them. They took their clothes, so they were mismatched and just
Oh my
trying
God.
to stay warm.
Yeah. They must have been desperate.
And here's a picture of one of them,
Yeah.
one of the women that was found.
Oh my God. Oh,
Yeah,
poor
pretty grisly.
the poor thing.
All 4 suffered crushing internal injuries, yet curiously, no outward sign as to what had caused them. Most baffling of all, one had her tongue removed at the base and was missing both eyeballs.
That's like yank. I mean, you would have to yank. Ooh, I don't even want to think about it.
I know. At the funeral, many of the deceased relatives were struck by the curious hue color to the skin, an unnatural orange, kind of like Trump, glow. Some reports even suggest that their hair had lost its pigmentation, leaving it a dull gray. That's interesting. So it's atmospheric to do it to the skin and the hair.
You know, the hair part could have came from extreme stress. I've heard of people
Turning
going into
white.
shock where hair turns white
Yeah.
with extreme shock. I've heard of people going into grief, and then when they come out of grief, even if it's only been like 5 months, their hair turned white or turned gray. I mean, not everybody, of course, but, you know, there's been people who've been so stressed that that's what happened to them. And that part it could have been from stress, but the orange part, I'm wondering if that came from decay in the freezing conditions, you know, the body decaying. And it's hard to say, but I mean, it's just speculation, which is what we're doing, of course.
And there's one picture. If you actually Google this on the internet, Dyatlov Pass incident, you'll actually see all the photographs. There's a little grave marker in the bottom corner, right by this person. So it looks like they might have already buried someone. So at that point, they knew they were dead, and they were moving on. There's a little X.
Hours before
Stick.
they were killed.
Yep.
Wait a minute.
See that little X right there? Like a little grave marker?
Yeah.
It's a little better to see in a bigger picture, but they're thinking that might have been one of the little graves left for one of the other people.
But they're setting up their,
Well, they're moving. They're
Yeah,
moving
they're
onward. Because it said
yeah.
after the tent, what's odd is we were wondering about an animal. Could an animal have attacked the tent?
Right.
Could it killed them? They said they noticed the tracks from the tent camp area were not frantic. You know, if you were panicked, you were frantically
now how did
going.
they
Let me finish.
Okay.
They weren't frantically going in other directions.
Right.
They were uniformly going down the hill together. So they weren't panicked when they were walking away.
Okay.
They weren't frantic, but they were nice and orderly. So that's what rules it out, that it was something that, might have attacked them.
Right. Okay. What I was about to say was they're moving away their camp in that picture.
Right. Yeah.
And they're obviously not stressing right here in this picture.
Right.
But why were they taking so many pictures as they were moving away and as they were just doing this? Were they just taking it to document their trip, or did they know something was wrong and they wanted to get evidence?
Well, I think even if stuff started to happen, you would still take photographs. I would take photographs of everything that happened with my group if I was able to.
Well, I agree. I mean, we would if we were on something like this,
It
but
wouldn't be
that's our
about,
nature. We do that with,
Yeah, especially in this day and age.
in this day and age, yeah, and especially with the kind of investigations and the places we go to, it would be something that we would naturally do.
But maybe they even thought, even experienced cross-country skiers that are stranded on the mountain in the snow, you may know, I may die. So you know what? I'm going to take as many photographs of what happened as we go.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So that if somebody did find our cameras, they would figure out what happened to us.
Right.
That could be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they want to document
their trip,
what and what happened, and also if it's on a terrain where not too many people go to, and they probably want to be smart and say, hey, let's capture all of this now, and maybe they're being on the safe side. Who knows?
Exactly. I mean, this is the last photograph that they took. And this is what many people think it might have been UFO, because there was the orange lights in the sky.
Now that looks like a finger right there, like a finger pressing something.
But that's a light reflection right there.
Yeah.
So that's where the camera's reflecting off light.
Now, sometimes if you're holding something and you're putting...
This is in the dark.
Okay.
So they're aiming out of the tent in the dark.
Okay. But what I mean was, if you're holding the camera and you press a button by mistake, it's likely to catch all kinds of
a finger,
weird light or a finger or something.
Right. I mean, I'm just saying this is speculative.
Yeah.
'Cause they did say that people had seen actual 3 orange lights in the sky that same night.
Yeah.
In fact, this photograph, which I showed you before, is another photograph they took from the campsite.
That one looks a little less like an accident than the first one. The first one looks like somebody could have just pressed the button by mistake while they were just leaving.
But this one,
yeah, it does. It kind of looks like you know how when you're camping, and there's the roof of the tent, and then there's kind of an opening and you can see the light coming down from the roof. That's what that kind of looks like. So it's obviously from the roof of the tent.
Well, they said this is outside then. This is a tree trunk.
Oh, it's outside. Oh, wait a minute. That's outside then.
And this is by the tree trunk itself that they took the photograph.
Okay.
It's an actual light. I don't know. It looks kind of like
and that's not the moon, or it's not any kind of planetary light. It is kind of something shining on that.
You can see it's behind the trunk.
Yeah, I'm looking at it more closly now.
So it's an interesting photograph. It does. I mean, it
is.
doesn't tell you anything, but that was one of the last photographs.
Yeah, that's freaky.
Now, there's reasons people think is why they died. We're actually talking about the Dyatlov incident, which happened in Russia in 1959. Some experienced cross-country skiers, of course, went up a mountain and hadn't been heard from for quite a while. A rescue party was sent, and they found some crazy things. When they got there, some of the people were dead, stripped of most of their clothes. They'd ripped out their tent from the inside. Not everybody was found at once. A few people were found at once, climbed up a tree. It was below 30 degrees, below zero. People were found 2 months later in the snow. So and their skin were orange, their hair had turned gray, so they're not really sure. I do have some theories, though, on what they think might have caused it. One of them is radiation. During the post-mortem, abnormal levels of radiation were found on the skiers' clothes. The source of the radiation was never determined, although some have speculated it may have come from the area itself. Indeed, one investigator claimed to have found high radiation readings at the slope of the mountain, perhaps a remnant of Russian military testing.
That would explain the light.
It would, and maybe even the skin.
Yeah.
However, no evidence has ever emerged to support this, leaving the radiation readings one of the most tantalizing elements of this whole mystery. The other is lights in the sky. Lev Ivanov, the lead investigator on the case, concluded that the party had been killed by an unknown compelling force. But privately, he became convinced that they'd been killed by aliens. Ivanov had collected reports from another group of hikers camping 30 miles south of the Dyatlov's party, who had claimed to see strange orange spheres in the sky. Ivanov collected other reports from both military and nearby weather stations of similar phenomena in the skies and came to believe a UFO was involved in the group's death. He later told researchers he was forced to close the case as soon as UFOs became involved, and his findings were immediately classified top secret. I suspected at the time, and I'm almost sure now, these bright light flying spheres had a direct connection to the group's death, he told one interviewer in the 90s. I suspected at the time, and I'm almost sure now, these bright flying spheres had a direct connection to the group's death. So this is the investigator who actually sidetracked and found a lot out about this possible UFOs.
And of course, he had time to think about it, and he had more time to inspect and look at it all this time. So
yeah,
and he's, who knows, maybe he was a skeptical man to begin with before he actually investigated this case.
Could be, and the fact that the Russian government said it's top secret, stop talking about it, this part is closed, is interesting.
It's always suspicious when they say top secret, stop talking.
Exactly. Yeah. Another, of course, theory is bad weather. Although the 9 were experienced skiers used to bad weather, the conditions had turned particularly bad around the time of the group's demise. Temperatures had plummeted to 24 degrees below zero, which had hastened to the student deaths as soon as they left their camp, so ill-equipped for the environment. Many researchers have speculated that the crushing injuries to the 4 students could be explained by a sudden avalanche, as could some of the damage to their tent. Their hasty and sudden departure from their tents could have been caused by them fleeing after hearing the sound of an oncoming avalanche. Once stranded in the freezing cold with their tent buried under the deep snow, they would have perished very, very quickly. Against the avalanche theory is the fact that the area in question is not specifically known for avalanches, and rescuers who helped conduct the search could find no evidence that one had occurred.
No, they would know whether an avalanche was occurring that night, but in that severe weather, I mean, not necessarily an avalanche, but was there like any kind of, snow that came crashing down? I don't know. I mean,
that's pretty much what an avalanche is, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. But avalanche, I thought, involved everything: snow, rocks. Well, I guess it could be. Yeah. Okay.
Another one is animal predators. Although no animal tracks are found around the bodies, wild animals are still known to attack soft tissue on corpses, notably tongues and eyes, which would explain the grisly injuries to one of the skiers. Another is paradoxal stripping. The lack of clothing could be explained by a known phenomena in people suffering from hypothermia called paradoxal stripping. 20 to 50% of deaths from hypothermia are associated with paradoxal undressing, caused by the effects of the cold on the hypothalamus and the phenomena known as vasoconstriction, where blood vessels contract as the body becomes fatigued. This quickly leads to a surge of blood into the extremities, fooling the victim into thinking they're overheating. So they strip off their clothes, then they freeze to death.
They must have ripped it off out of desperation because
I would imagine that's
it's too damn cold. I'm sorry to rip off your clothes. And that.
But if you got this condition, maybe you don't know the difference. You just think it's so hot, you need to take your clothes off.
Yeah, that's.
So your body's basically
Especially if
going
you
in
got a lot of
reverse.
layers on.
But your body's in reverse now. Everything cold is hot. So you're like, oh my God.
That can happen, and especially if you have a lot of layers and you're not used to it, and you're trying to, that can happen.
Just strip it off because you're like, oh my God, I gotta get cool.
And then all of a sudden the body goes into shock.
Yep, exactly. Now there are theories and solutions. Some of these are pretty far out. So
okay, it gets weirder and weirder. Everybody.
It does. Some of the theories are almost weirder than the case. KGB agents controlled environment. Now Alex Ratkin, an author of the book Dyatlov Pass, thinks 3 of the party members were actually KGB agents on a mission to uncover a cell of CIA agents. They were to deliver radioactive samples and take photographs of the Americans, but something went wrong and the CIA agents were killed the group. 2 or more members of the party were hired by the KGB to deliver fake proof of radioactive tainted clothes. The rest of the group was probably unaware of the real purpose of the journey. Ratkin version is one of the widespread now and is quite logical in terms of explanation of the most mysterious issues: the radioactive clothes and the usage of radioactive detectors, gray foam on Doroshenko's face, absences of shoes and upper garments, at least one camera missing, etc. This is the one I thought was interesting. That could be more plausible. The hikers were mistaken for escaped prisoners from a gulag prison. One private investigator who spoke to former servicemen in the area said hikers could have been killed after being mistaken for escaped prisoners from a local gulag prison camp. Or alternatively, they were killed in a cleanup operation after a series of military exercises. Siberia at the time of the tragedy was still a land of gulag. Many political prisoners were released in 1953 to 1956, but criminals were still behind bars. Many small concentration camps were dispersed all over the region. The closest was Ivlog, situated just miles from the site of the tragedy. So they would mistake them for being prisoners that were escaped and killed them all.
That wouldn't surprise me, that part.
But why would you steal all their shoes and strip them naked?
Yeah, exactly. Except for what happened later, right? Yeah. And if they were escaped prisoners, wouldn't they have just handcuffed them and take them back rather than just?
And wouldn't there be more footprints of?
Yeah, that. So it's more plausible, but it still doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Special Forces. Another theory blames the deaths of the group on Soviet Special Forces that simply got rid of unwanted witnesses. People who oppose this scenario point out that none of the rescuers even reported any unusual footprints. Since most of the members of the group had no footwear on one or both legs, their prints were easily recognizable and distinguishable. However, the footprints were never closely examined. No one expected to find their bodies, and missing this key proof is plausible. It is true that the government officials were more or less aware of a general route that the group will undertake, but accidents do happen. This is an interesting one. Manzi natives.
Manzi natives.
There were no prison breakouts. Since there were no prison breakouts from the local Ivdelsky corrective labor colony, the next in line suspects for the culprit were the indigenous Manzi people living in Khanty Manzia, an autonomous district within the Tyumen region in Russia. At the second week of the investigation, the prevalent theory was that the evil Manzi hunters, who often camped on the mountain, committed the crime on the night of February 1st. But again, there's no footprints much. I mean, the tent was torn from the inside out and not the outside in. I don't know. I don't know if that
it doesn't seem to. That doesn't make any sense either.
Another one is shrooms. The possibility the group may have ingested mushrooms, either intentionally or unintentionally, and suffered the delirium and sweating with acute doses. This would account for what appears to be bizarre behavior of the group on that final night. Fly agaric, Amanita muscurara, are very toxic, but they become less lethal when dried out. Conveniently, they grow commonly under pine trees, so maybe they took mushrooms and freaked out.
Or wouldn't they have done a test on the body to see if there was any of that?
Chemical tests?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if they would have done that in 1959, though.
Yeah, back then
'Cause
probably
they
wouldn't.
probably wouldn't have done like toxicology and stuff.
Okay, well, but the mushroom theory, I can kind of see where
Where you'd freak out, take your clothes off,
yeah, that would make
know,
more sense, and they're probably
hallucinations,
and they probably wanted to sit around and hallucinate and tell stories and
and then they rip their tent out.
yeah, you never know. I mean,
That's true.
yeah.
Of course, the UFO. Some conspiracy theorists claim the UFO scared the group away. And seemingly incredible, this claim might have had some base to it. About the same time, Soviet armed forces did launch several rockets from the Baikonur base. Although the military claimed the rockets landed in North Ural Mountains, several geologists 70 kilometers from the mountains saw some glowing and pulsating orbits flying in the direction of the mountain on the day of the tragedy, evening of February 1st. Secret launches, celestial phenomena that accompanied the incident, convinced everybody that skiers' lives had been sacrificed to the new Soviet idol, the rocket.
Well,
They were in the wrong place at the wrong time, but the Soviets actually tested a rocket.
well, they were. You know what they need to do? They need to go back to the newspapers of the time and see what was going on, and see what the
This is
weather
Russia
was
too, though, so they control a lot more than they do here.
Well, that's true, but newspapers, could tell you what the weather conditions were, what was going on as far as technology testing, and
But you're not going to tell you secret Russian testing. You're not going to know.
Not secret Russian testing, no, but
infrasound. This one was interesting. Part of technological theory that has been suggested is that an infrasound might have been responsible for sudden, unpleasant feelings among the group. New research into rare weather phenomena suggested that a perfect storm could have struck the campers in the night, panicking them so much they would have fled the tent and fallen victim to the brutal cold before they came to their senses. So like a government-controlled experiment creating a perfect storm. If they were caught in the middle, what's the government going to do? Say, oops, sorry?
yeah.
Yeti. Another theory is the legendary Yeti. It's been seen for years in the mountains and is thought that the party may have been attacked by the creature in the night. Now we know snowmen exist. According to the book Mountains of the Dead, one of the group had written on a piece of paper a day or two before the incident, now we know snowmen exist. It's a cryptic message.
That's a very cryptic message. Would they have found the time to write that in a panic? Is what I'm wondering.
Well, they were keeping journals the whole time as much as they could. So
okay.
It's interesting they would write. Maybe they saw it before anything happened.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. Another theory is lightning strike, a ball of lightning, and the tent slits, hot spot near the tent, and a camera on a makeshift tripod suggest they were observing something in the sky. Given that the local Mansi people blamed the golden orbs for the tragedy and repeated sightings of lights in the sky from reliable witnesses in the same period together, with photos from the group's camera possibly are aerial lights. It is possible that the group fled from the tent due to an occurrence of ball lightning. Getting very close to the tent, hovering there, melting snow beneath to create the hot spot. The group then hurried to a tree line and lit a fire whilst they waited for the object to disappear. The theory then describes how the two deaths at the Cedar were due to single electrocution event, normal lightning strike or ball lightning, creating burnt hair, bleeding, head orifices, large burns, burnt clothing, pulmonary edema and tree damage, and subsequent 4 deaths in the ravine due to an explosion event near the den.
Sounds horrible.
So yeah. Yeah,
very horrible.
Which one's worse, Another one is that they actually have proof that they made a makeshift stove inside their tent. And one theory was that it somehow fell over. And if you have a hot stove of coals fell over in your tent, the first thing you're going to want to do is
run.
Get out.
Run, yeah.
So you're going to tear your way out of the tent. Whatever you have to do to get out of that tent, you're going to do it if
you're
there's a fire.
You're going to do that, yeah. And especially if the fire touches your clothes, of course you're going to rip them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they said they never found any evidence of them ever having cooked the entire time.
Okay, so that kind of rules that out.
Yes, but that was
unless they were using it just for heating.
Yeah. So that's what happened with the actual case. Now, you'd think the story stops there, but it really doesn't. It actually kept going throughout the years. From 1960 to 61, several airplane crashes took away the lives of 9 pilots and geologists who were sent there. For a time, flights were totally canceled in that region. Among more recent victims of the mountain was a crash of an Mi-8 in 2009. Pilots ignored long-standing unofficial no-fly zone. Fortunately, they survived the crash, but they couldn't explain why their helicopter went down so quickly and without any warning. A lot of tourists today repeat the track of the Dyatlov group, but none of the groups have ever contained 9 people. In the early 2000s, a group of 9 tourists under the supervision of rescue crew repeated the same descent down the slope of the mountain. Despite snow cover and nighttime, none of the participants got any significant bruises or cuts. Those who observed the students did not report any difficulty in locating the members on the mountainside. None of the group members were lost, and vocal eye contact was constant between the group members at all times. This only adds to the mystery of what really happened on the mountain on that day in 1959. And the case of the Dyatlov Pass deaths remains open to this day. Now, it doesn't stop there. We have a recent addition to this case. In January of this year, a body was discovered by tourists at the infamous Dyatlov Pass in the mountains, where the 9 hikers disappeared and died in 1959. An unidentified body has been discovered by tourist hikers at the infamous Dyatlov Pass region, according to local security officials. A group of 9 tourists, reportedly from Perm, contacted emergency services overnight on Friday. The site where the body was reportedly located is infamous for the tragic and mysterious deaths of the hikers in 1959. Now, you said you found something more recent, right? That was from. I found that was from January.
Now, this is from April.
Okay.
Now, they mentioned that in continuation of finding this body.
This is last month, then.
Yeah, this is last month. They said that the group who found the body has also disappeared, but the Russian government is denying this.
So 9 more people have vanished because they found that body?
That's what this article mentions. So they say that this is how the article reads. They say a lot of theories have been presented in this case, all variations from ALMAs to aliens or CIA agents eliminating them. Not long ago, it was reported that a body had been found by a group of tourists at the Dyatlov Pass in January 2016. This group has, however, also disappeared, but now the Russian government denies this. A body has been discovered by tourists at the infamous Dyatlov Pass in Russia's Ural Mountains, where 9 hikers mysteriously died in 1959. Emergency services have been reportedly momentarily lost contact with the group. So they called emergency services too, but they lost contact with them. And they said that was possibly, well, who knows why they lost contact. I'm about to get to that. They said the unidentified body was discovered by tourist hikers at the infamous Dyatlov Pass in, another word that I don't know how to pronounce, Sverdlovskaya region. Okay, well, I think I did it pretty well. According to local security officials, a group of 9 tourists, reportedly from Perm, contacted emergency services overnight on Friday, following a message from the group.
You just read what I just read.
Yeah, via satellite phone.
Interesting.
Officials lost contact with the hikers. Okay, wait a minute. It was due to bad weather conditions. Emergency groups are unable to reach the barely accessible site where the body was found. Some reports suggest that it's a male about 50 years old.
Interesting.
The body, yeah. So they claim they lost, the emergency services claim that they lost sight of contact with the group because of weather conditions, and it was a satellite phone. But, well, I mean, wouldn't they have been, well, I don't know. I mean, a satellite phone, how reliable would a satellite phone be?
Well, if you got weather conditions, it would cut it out.
It would cut it out,
satellite
yeah.
connection.
That's true.
That's the problem with having a satellite phone, is if something gets in the way of your signal, you have no satellite phone to use.
You have no satellite phone to use. And I wasn't sure who knows what other way they could have got a hold of emergency services, but the body, they found it anyway, even if the group disappeared. I mean, the body,
Yeah, I guess the body was in like an area that wasn't easily accessible.
Accessible, yeah, exactly.
To get to anyway. So the fact that the group found it, I don't know, it's just weird.
But it doesn't mean it's connected with this former group just because they found it. I mean, if it's severe weather conditions, if it's not accessible, it could be something could have happened to somebody else.
It could have just been a hiker or a skier who just, got lost, hurt himself.
Had some awful luck.
Had orange skin, gray hair, his tongue was ripped out, a Yeti.
Well, they didn't really say that. They just said
the
50 years old, but they didn't say that he had any of those markings that those other students did.
But I'm sure they wouldn't tell you even if they did find that, because that just, proves a connection.
Yeah, if
there is a connection.
If there's a connection, right.
But I mean, maybe it's a Yeti. I mean, there's a photograph that was taken. I guess the Discovery Channel did a documentary about the Russian skiers and this whole incident, but it was focusing on the mountain, the Mansi indigenous people, and that they had seen Yeti on a regular basis too, and they actually took that photograph, which a figure. Now, whether it's an actual Yeti, a Bigfoot, that would explain the ripped out tongue and maybe the eyes, but would it explain ripping the tent out from the inside out?
It wouldn't explain that, no.
And why would it take their shoes?
Yeah, why would it take their why would it take their shoes?
It doesn't make any sense to me.
That's the whole problem with this case, and I was thinking about this case. It happened in 1959. Can you imagine if they had the modern technology to inspect things that they do now?
Oh, the forensics, everything.
So much more would have been solved.
And the ice would have preserved everything, so it would have been even easier for them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we are out of time, so go ahead and tell them what's next week.
Saints and Mystics.
Saints and Mystics. And what are we going to cover at Saints and Mystics?
We're going to be covering why saints are different than everybody else. How they can help you in today's world. And we're going to be covering their qualities and what we can learn from them, and how we can possibly bring some of that help that they're supposed to work with into our lives.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could all use a little saint.
We could always use a little help,
blessings.
couldn't we, everybody?
Absolutely. So if you want to tune into our saintly show next week, Ecto Portal right here at 8 o'clock Wednesday nights, 8 to 10.
Yep.
FCCFreeRadio.com, Studio 1A live, or you can download our podcast right after.
And of course, we want your call-ins next week, so we're going to repeat the number next week.
We will. We're gonna get a caller to call us back.
Yeah, somebody's going to call.
Exactly. All right, folks. So until next week, get your skis out, but be careful not to head up to the Dyatlov Pass, Devil's Pass. Make sure you take a buddy.
And make sure you stay warm.
That's right. Stay warm. Bye. Royalty-free, copyright-free music by Ross Bugden.